We are live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Exodus class number 8. We're going to pick up one last verse of chapter 7, and then we're going to get all of chapter 8 today. We are into the judgments, the 10 plagues of Egypt, as they're called. I call them the judgments against Egypt. Last week we talked about the first plague, or the first judgment, which was the Nile River turning to blood. And today we're going to talk about 3 more plagues. We're going to talk about plagues 2, 3, and 4. I'm only going to put the first 4 up here that we're covering. We covered this mostly last week. I'm going to do a few more things on that right now. And I'm going to talk about the second plague, which is frogs. The third plague is gnats and lice. And the fourth plague is flies. And interestingly enough, things change about the plagues after the first 3. Much like in the book of Revelation, things change after the seal judgment. After you finish the seal judgments, those are a little easier, and they kind of hit everybody. But then as you get to the trumpet judgments, now you've got things that are only hitting the bad guys and that are much more severe. And then the bowl judgments eventually are even more severe at the back end. I'm going to talk about those later on. But as you'll see, these are not as severe, and they do hit everybody. And it's not until we get to down here that we begin to get to the point where the Jews are being exempted from that. So, verse 25, let me start there. Those of you that are following along at home, you can download the notes. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, there's a link you can click to get the class notes, and you'll have all the same notes that everybody in here has. Then all you need is your Bible. I don't have the Bible in the notes. So we're going to start with verse 25 of chapter 7. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. So we talked about the Nile last week, how God turned the Nile into blood. And that we're finished with that. Now 7 days passed before the next plague. Interesting. Why would that be mentioned? Anybody know anything about the number 7 in the Bible that might lead us to think that maybe there's something going on here that we ought to pay attention to? Well, I've done some research on this. Why 7 days? And there are 3 different theories out there, and I'm not going to try to tell you one is more right than the other, although you'll probably figure out which one I think is right as we go through it. But the first theory of it is that, if you recall, after God struck all the waters of Egypt and they all became blood, he made one exception, and the exception was groundwater. So if you dig down, like many of you have wells if you live in the country, if you dig down in the ground to get to your groundwater, apparently God didn't strike the groundwater as blood. That the groundwater was allowed to remain as pure water. Now, most of Egypt, once you get outside the Nile River Valley, is in the desert, and you'd probably have to go down hundreds of feet to get water in many of those areas. But at least around the Nile River, which is where most of the people live, most of the people could have dug down and gotten to some water down in there. But those who couldn't had to go without water for 7 days, right? So maybe 7 days. 7 days is about as long as you can go without water. Maybe, especially in a desert climate, many people would die without water for 7 days. So that might be one. And there are people out there that say that's the reason for the 7 days. After 7 days, people without water would have died. So that's one possibility. The second possibility is that maybe it took God 7 days to cleanse the Nile, to get the Nile back again. I tend not to go with that one very much. In my mind, if God could turn the Nile into blood in a few minutes, he can clean it up in a few minutes. But that's my thinking. But maybe God cleansed the water by letting the water pass through or something, and maybe it took 7 days to do that. So there are many experts out there who will argue that might be the reason for the 7 days. To me, the third one's probably the most likely, and that's that God wanted the Egyptians and the Jews too to dwell on this thing for a while. He didn't want the water he didn't just want the blood to pass away quickly. He wanted it to be there for a while so that the people would pay attention to it, dwell on it, and think about it, and understand it. To me, that makes the most sense. Bear in mind, Egypt was the most powerful country in the world at that time. The most powerful country that had ever existed up till that point was Egypt at that time. So here they are, all of a sudden they don't have any water, right? And they need to think about that for a few days. Why? Why don't they have any water? We're going to talk about the gods of Egypt later and all the different gods that supposedly protect the Nile River and protect the water of the Nile River. Obviously, they all failed. Right? None of them succeeded. So, so in my mind, that's probably the most likely, is that God wanted the people of Egypt and the Jews as well to dwell on what he was doing and who he was. Now, let me continue on, since I'm talking about gods. Many experts believe that the 10 plagues of Egypt have as a backdrop God embarrassing or humiliating the gods of Egypt. The Egyptians believed that there were two great life forces. One was the sun, and they had a sun god and a bunch of other gods around the sun, because the sun brought life and brought plants to grow and all of that. And the other was the Nile River, because the Nile River just flowed through with water, and every year it flooded and it brought new soil, and you could plant again on fresh new soil. So those were the two major areas of gods of Egypt, were the sun and the Nile River. And God is obviously attacking the Nile River here. He's very clearly attacking the Nile River. And yeah, Pharaoh's gods had the ability to turn, or Pharaoh's magicians had the ability to turn a little bit of water into blood, but nothing like what God just did. He turned an entire massive river that's a couple of miles wide into blood. So let's take a look at those gods for a minute. First of all, the Nile River itself was actually a god in ancient Egypt. That was considered to be a god. So the Nile River was a god. Then there's this guy called Khnum, and Khnum was one of the guardian gods of the Nile. He was supposed to protect the Nile. Probably didn't do a very good job of it here. And then there was Hapi. I don't know if that's how you spell it. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. He was the spirit god of the Nile. So supposedly he was the spirit that dwelled inside the water of the Nile. Obviously he didn't do much good for the people in this situation. Then there was Osiris, who was one of the major gods of ancient Egypt. He was the guardian god of the Nile. He was in charge of guarding the Nile against anything that might pollute it. Didn't do a very good job, did he? Then we can look at Sepek. Sepek is the crocodile god. He was the one who had the crocodile head. So chances are, with the Nile turning to blood, all the crocodiles probably died, I would guess. So he probably didn't do a really great job here. Then you have Neith and Hathor, and Neith and Hathor were two different fish protecting gods that protected different types of fish that were in the water. I don't know what happened to the fish. The Bible doesn't tell us, but presumably if the Nile River turned to blood and stayed that way for a couple of days, chances are all the fish probably died. Probably. So he probably didn't do a great job either. So with this one miracle that God did here, this one judgment that God did, he not only embarrassed Pharaoh, but he embarrassed all of the Egyptian gods. So put yourself in the place of an Egyptian, right? You know, every day you get up and you worship these gods, and you burn incense to them, and you say prayers to them, and you have statues of them in your home, and they have totally let you down, right? They have totally failed to accomplish what they were supposed to accomplish. As we go through these, you'll see that God does that with each of the various plagues. God takes various plagues and uses them to embarrass Egyptian gods. Now, I don't know if that's actually intended in here, but many experts say that that was a key thing that God was trying to accomplish here. So I'm just going to throw that out there to tell you that that's something that many people think that. So this probably had a major impact on the Egyptian people, because all of a sudden their whole religious structure is falling apart around them when they see the Nile River turn to blood. Everything they believe in about their gods is falling apart around them. So they're beginning to understand the power of the Israelites' God. They're beginning to see it. In addition to that, the Jews for the first time are beginning to see the power of their own God. Now think about this, right? The Jews knew that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob talked to God back in the day, but nobody seems to be talking to God now, right? I mean, they're in slavery. They've been in slavery for 216 years in Egypt. No, God doesn't seem to be there doing any miracles, talking to them. There's not a lot of evidence that God even exists to them, right? And bear in mind what they don't have yet. They don't have any written language yet. That came later at Mount Sinai. They don't have any scrolls yet that have written history of what's happened in the past that God has done. All they have is stories that have been passed down of these three guys, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who were in the past and who supposedly talked to God, right? So they don't have any real proof that God really exists. And all of a sudden, they see some real proof that God really exists. God just turned the Nile River to blood, and he did it to get them released from slavery. So it's starting to have an impact on Israel. As we go through the book of Exodus, we're going to see that their knowledge of God, their understanding of God dramatically increases. And the reason is that God's going to do a whole lot of miracles during the book of Exodus. This is just the first one that they're going to see, but they're going to get to see a whole lot. And that is what's going to bring them together as a nation in covenant with God. There are actually really four major times as you go through the scriptures where God does a whole lot of miracles all at once. One of them is here in the book of Exodus. God will do a whole lot of miracles to help the Jewish people, the Israelite people, to come together as a nation and to come together in covenant as a nation that is in covenant with God. That's what's going to happen here. It really hadn't happened prior to this point. It's going to happen here, and God's going to show them tons of miracles here to do that. The second time we see a bunch of miracles in the Bible is in the time of Elijah and Elisha, when God is getting ready to punish the northern kingdom and ultimately the southern kingdom for their lack of confidence in him, for their lack of obedience to him. That's the second time. We see a ton of miracles be done around that time. The third time is in the time of Jesus and the apostles, when Israel is seeing miracles going on all around them. And the idea is God is telling them, I have sent you the Messiah, believe it. And the Jews have to make a decision. Either they believe that or they don't. And those who believe it get the glory of being in the kingdom. Those who don't get judgment, because the Romans are about to come and destroy the temple and destroy the nation. And then the fourth time, there is a fourth time, is in the book of Revelation, during the 7-year period of the tribulation, where God will show huge miracles, and they will be very similar to these. When you look at these miracles, these are similar to what's in the book of Revelation. That will be Israel's chance to come to Jesus, finally, to be able to come to Jesus. Questions on that? Okay, let's move on to chapter 8 now. I'm going to read you all of verses 1 through 15. This is the second judgment, and this is the judgment of the frogs. So let me read that for you. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs on your whole country. The Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace and your bedroom and onto your bed, into the houses of your officials and on your people.'" Imagine having frogs on your right? "And into your ovens in kneading troughs. The frogs will come up on you and your people and all your officials." So God says it a second time. You're going to have frogs right on your body even. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the streams and canals and ponds, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt." So the frogs are going to come out of the Nile River. The Nile is somehow going to magically make all these frogs, and they're going to come out of the Nile River and come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. But the magicians did the same thing by their secret arts. They also made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. This wasn't to me. This one doesn't sound too difficult. I mean, there's already God is making jillions of frogs in the Nile River, right? And the magicians say, "Come on up on the land," and the frogs come up. Okay, to me that doesn't seem like a great miracle, but apparently God is saying the magicians convinced Pharaoh that they could do it too. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord." Moses said to Pharaoh, "I leave to you the honor of setting the time for me to pray for you and your officials and your people, that you and your houses may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile." "Tomorrow," Pharaoh said. Moses replied, "It will be as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials and your people. They will remain only in the Nile." After Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs he had brought on Pharaoh. And the Lord did what Moses asked. The frogs died in the houses, in the courtyards, and in the fields. They were piled into heaps, and the land reeked of them. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. So there's a lot there. I'm going to kind of go through that kind of passage or verse by verse. So Moses gets told, go to Pharaoh, right? Go to Pharaoh. Now, he just went to Pharaoh 7 days earlier about the blood in the Nile. He go back, right? Well, think of this. This is the most powerful guy in the world, and you're going to walk in and say, you need to do what I tell you to do. Right? Moses is probably a little nervous about that. Go to Pharaoh, say, the Lord says to let my people go so that they may worship me. Okay? And he tells him, and we've already heard that previously. That's not the first time Moses is saying that to Pharaoh. If you refuse to let them go, I'm going to send a plague of frogs on your whole country. So a plague of frogs is coming. Do we see a plague of frogs anywhere else in the Scriptures? The answer is yes, we do. There are two different places where we see it. Let me show that to you for a minute. Both in Revelation. Oh, there it is. Yeah. The fifth trumpet judgment has demons coming out of the abyss onto the earth. And also, and they aren't frogs necessarily, but they're kind of weird-looking insects, if you will. And then in the sixth bowl judgment in Revelation 16:13, there are demons coming out, and those are compared to frogs. So the frogs do occur in there in Revelation. So he says he's going to send a plague of frogs. The Nile will teem with frogs. So the frogs are going to be made in the Nile River. God's going to create them in the Nile River. Zillions of frogs are going to be created in the Nile River. And then it says they will come up. So they're going to come up out of the Nile and go into the land of Israel around it. They will come up out of the Nile, go into the houses, into your palace, into your bedroom, into your bed, into the houses of your officials, and on your people. They're actually going to be on you. Into your ovens and kneading troughs. In other words, they're going to be everywhere. And when you look at the plague that I talked about, just a minute ago here, the fifth trumpet judgment, the same thing. The demons that come up in there come into everything. They go over the walls and into homes, and doors can't stop them. They go everywhere. So this is very similar to what's going to happen in the fifth trumpet judgment. The frogs will come up on you and your people and all the officials. So God says it a second time. The frogs are actually going to be on you. Then the Lord tells Moses, tell Aaron to stretch out your hand and your staff over the streams and canals and ponds and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Now, initially, all Aaron did was bring them out of the Nile. Now he's going to bring them out of streams, canals, and ponds. So any kind of surface water in Egypt is going to have frogs come out of it. This is very similar to what happened with the blood last week. All the surface water in Egypt was polluted with blood last week. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. So imagine frogs covering the land. Right? I mean, frogs hopping around everywhere. Obviously, Pharaoh was getting a little vexed with this whole situation. So the magicians try to do the same thing, right? And they go down to the Nile River and say, give me some frogs, right? And some frogs come up out of the Nile. Well, there's a jillion frogs in the Nile to begin with, so I don't know that this is a big miracle, but apparently they did something that convinced Pharaoh that they could do it too. And we talked last week about how the magicians Satan has the ability to do a certain level of miracles as well, and Satan was able to get the magicians to be able to pull some frogs out as well, to the point where Pharaoh thought, well, my guys can do it too, so what's the big deal here? Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Now that's big, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, obviously the frogs are getting to Pharaoh, right? Having frogs in his bed, in his bedroom, in his palace, people can't sleep them out fast enough. They just keep coming in more and more and more, hopping all over the place, voiding their systems and everything else in his palace. Pharaoh's obviously getting a little vexed by the frogs, so he wants.
Frogs also make a lot of noise, too.
That's right. Yes. Ribbit. Right. So the frogs are in there. Pharaoh's saying, okay, maybe it's time to get rid of these frogs. So he calls Moses and Aaron in. And he says, pray to the Lord. So he tells them, pray. He knows that can make a difference. Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people. Notice it's me first and then my people. And I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. It's like, wow, okay, we're only on the second plague, and Pharaoh's given in already, right? He's saying, hey, I'm gonna let you people go. All you gotta do is take these frogs away, and I'll let your people go. Piece of cake, right? Sounds easy. So Moses takes him at his word. Moses said to Pharaoh, I leave to you the honor of setting the time for me to pray for you and your officials and your people, that you and your house may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile. So some frogs are going to still be in the Nile. They're not going to be dead forever. They're not going to all die. But all the other zillions of them are all going to be gone. And he says, so Pharaoh, tell me when you want me to do this prayer to God, and I'll do it for you. Because, you're going to let my people go, so I will do this prayer for you. Right? Tomorrow, Pharaoh said. So Moses replied, it will be as you say, so that you may know that there was no one like the Lord our God. So, and that's, again, the Lord our God there is Yahweh Elohim. So the Lord our God. He says, the frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials and your people. They will remain only in the Nile. So Moses says, okay, we got a deal here. Right? I will get rid of the frogs. You let my people go. Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. I'll make the prayer to God. I'll make this happen. I'll be back, I'll be back tomorrow. You can let us go and we'll be on our way. Sounds good. After Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs he had brought on Pharaoh. And the Lord did what Moses asked. So Moses did exactly what he said he would. He went to God in prayer, and God did exactly what Moses asked him to do. He did it. He took care of the frogs, right? The frogs died in the houses, in the courtyards, and in the fields. So they didn't just all go back in the Nile. They died wherever they were. Imagine dead frogs everywhere, right? In your bed, and on your kitchen table, in whatever, in your refrigerator or whatever. Dead frogs. They probably didn't have refrigerators in those days, but dead frogs everywhere. They were piled into heaps, and the land reeked of them. So the people, I always remember the scene from the Ten Commandments, where they're brooming up the frogs and they're creating big piles of frogs, of the dead frogs. So you got dead frogs everywhere, and you can imagine after a few days of that, whew, in the Egyptian heat, the summer heat in Egypt, you can imagine how everything stinks. And there's piles of them everywhere. So again, the people get a chance to kind of think about this for a while. Even though the frogs aren't jumping on them anymore, they get a chance for a few days while these frogs are reeking and stinking to think about the power of God. And the Egyptians get to do that, and the Jews get to do that. But is Pharaoh going to keep his word? Of course he is. He's a man of honor, right? But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. So he lied, didn't he? He promised to let the Jews go. He didn't let them go. Now notice it doesn't say God hardened his heart. It says he hardened his heart. We're going to come later on to God hardening his heart. Later on, some of these plagues are so bad that Pharaoh would have let it go, but God hardened his heart. But at this point, we're still at the point where he's hardening his own heart. He's hardening his own heart and basically saying, oh, okay, frogs are dead. This is pretty good, right? All I got to do is go promise to do something and lie about it and deceive people, and I get out from underneath the punishment. This is okay. I can do this again, right? This is a good way to do life, right? We're going to find out. So, let's see, what did I read out here?
Pharaoh reneged on his promise.
Huh?
Where the Pharaoh reneged on
Left off, but I'm just trying to. Oh yeah, we'll talk about the gods. So the gods, there are a couple of gods involved here. One of them is again this guy Happy. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but Happy was the spirit of the Nile. And interestingly enough, and another god by the name of so this god would have been. He was supposed to protect the people from things coming out of the Nile and hurting them. So he has obviously been humiliated here. The other guy is this guy Hecate, and I don't know how to pronounce that. It's H-E-Q-T. Hecate, if you've probably seen pictures of him. He had the head of a frog and the body of a woman. That was the Egyptians had images of these gods. They had statues of these gods, and this god had the head of a frog, and the body of a woman. So this was the frog god. Pretty embarrassing for him, right? So these Egyptian gods are continuing to get embarrassed by everything God does. And again, as the Egyptian people are sitting there for a few days, smelling the stink, and saying, maybe there's something about this God that, somehow he seems to be just humiliating the gods I was believing in. Maybe there's something about him. And also the Jews look at it and say, wow, this is now the second time God has showed us a miracle. Maybe this God is real, this God that we believe in, that our families all say is true. Wow, we're starting to see real proof of this now. So it's starting to build the faith of the Jews as well.
Also, they probably didn't appreciate it all happening to them, too.
Right, at this point, that's a great point. At this
They
point,
probably were annoyed.
at this point, not only is it happening to the Egyptians, but it's also happening to the Jews. That will change shortly. But at this point, through these first three, all this is happening to Jews. They have to endure this as well. But as the plagues get worse, it gets to the point where the Jews will not have to endure it anymore. But at this point, they are having to endure it. Thank you.
It's also interesting that Pharaoh's gods could duplicate some of those, but they could never undo it.
Right.
Those first two, they couldn't undo it.
Yeah, so there are obviously limits to Satan's power. We're going to talk about that when we get to the next plague here. There's obviously limits. God gives Satan some power to do miracles. Kind of weird, but it's true. We know that from the Bible. But there are limits. Satan can't do miracles at the same level that God can. Or that somebody who's with God can if they are empowered to do that. Okay, let's move on to the next plague. The next plague is the plague of the gnats or the lice. Depending on what translation you have, your translation will either say gnats or lice. Interestingly enough, the Hebrew word is the same for gnats and lice. So we don't know whether the answer is gnats or lice, so I'm going to call it gnats and lice just to keep it simple. So let's read now the plague of the gnats. Then the Lord said to Moses, So we've finished this plague now, the frogs. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the ground." So take your staff and hit the ground with it. "And throughout the land of Egypt, the dust will become gnats." So all the dust in Egypt. Now, Egypt is a desert. It's all dust. I mean, everywhere you look, it's dust. So imagine everything, all of a sudden the entire dust of Egypt becomes gnats and lice. They did this.
That goes back to God being creator again, huh?
Yeah. "And when Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust of the ground, gnats came on people and animals." So all of a sudden you're surrounded with this cloud of gnats, and you're covered with this cloud of lice. All the dust throughout the land of Egypt became gnats. But when the magicians first of all, does anybody have the lice word in there? I've given you a translation that has gnats. Lice is a valid translation here as well of this. So if you have a translation that says lice, that is valid as well. Now, lice are a lot more serious than gnats. Gnats just bother you. Lice actually can endanger you. At any rate, but when the magicians tried to produce the gnats by their secret arts, they could not. So here we are, we're only through 2 of these. We've now reached the point where Satan doesn't have any power anymore. So there's obviously a limit to Satan's power. God gave him some power in these 2. But already with the gnats and lice, magicians can't do this. They can't turn dust into gnats or lice.
King James has lice.
Lice. Okay. Yeah. And both of them, as I said, both of them are valid. The Hebrew word can be translated as either gnats or lice. So for the purposes of what I'm saying here, I'm just saying gnats and lice, but it could be either. So that the magicians couldn't do it either. "Since the gnats were on people and animals everywhere, the magicians said to Pharaoh," let me stop for a second. So the gnats are on people and animals everywhere, and the lice are on people and animals everywhere. So people are out there swatting these things away and dealing with all the stuff growing on their skin, and it's ugly and awful. And what do? You go take a bath in the Nile, but the Nile is just coming out of being blood. I mean, it's not a great time, right? Difficult time for the Egyptians. The magicians now go to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, "Show me you guys can do this too." Of course you can. Show me you can, right? And they say, we can't. This is the finger of God. So even the magicians at this point acknowledge that this has exceeded them. They do not, Satan has not given them the power to do this. But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen, just as the Lord had said. So Pharaoh is not going to let the Jews go over this deal. And we don't know exactly when the lice leave or when the gnats leave. It doesn't tell us. The next word is then. And then could be the next day, it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be a couple of days, a week, maybe another 7 days. We don't know. But at some point, presumably, the lice and gnats are gone, and we move on. Oh, before we move on, let me put one other thing out there. Most people don't realize this, but when you see pictures of Egyptian priests back in those days, you see the pictures on the tombs and everything. Egyptian priests always had no hair. They had shaved their head. And we know from what we found through archaeology that Egyptian priests bathed constantly. The reason they bathed, and the reason they had no hair anywhere on their bodies, they shaved themselves completely, was so that they would not have any insects on their body. So imagine being an Egyptian priest, right? And all of a sudden you are covered in lice and you can't get away from the gnats. Okay. So not only is God embarrassing the Egyptian gods here, but he's embarrassing the Egyptian priests.
Do you know if there's anything, you know how they did pictures on everything over in Egypt? Is there any evidence of that somebody depicted these 10 plagues?
I don't recall seeing anything. Steve, do you recall when we were over there? Deb, the 3 of us were over there together in Egypt.
I didn't think about the plagues while we were there.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in the sculptures, I don't think there was any, but we didn't see every sculpture open.
Yeah. Our tour guide was a Christian. He was, he was a believer. So it's not like we were dealing with a Muslim tour guide or something. Our tour guide was a Christian, but I don't recall him ever talking about the 10 plagues of Egypt when we were there, or pointing anything out to us. I mean, we saw thousands of sculptures, things like that. It got mind-numbing after a while.
Probably
They
not
just looked at
something
all
they
of it.
wanted to depict.
Yeah.
Probably
They
not.
probably didn't forgot it.
I wonder if Stephen Kelly would have any insight on that. I just read, and he sent me some information about they just opened one of the largest museums in the world in Cairo,
Yes.
the Egyptian Museum. I just wonder how much biblical information would be in that particular
Oh, I think it'd be
museum.
almost zero. You have to realize the government of Egypt, the people of Egypt are 90% Muslim. And the government of Egypt is very much a church and state as one kind of government. There are about 10% of the people that are Christians. Most of them are what are called Coptic Christians, which is a very ancient sect that goes all the way back to before Islam. It goes back to about 200 or 300 AD.
We were actually in that museum, that new one that just opened.
No, not the one that just opened. The one that Stephen's talking about, he and I went out to breakfast this week. He was just explaining this to me. He's going to go see it when he goes over there shortly. This is a brand new museum. Do you remember when we were there, the old museum, the ancient one that the British built?
Right.
That was all confused, and you went from this room to that room, and you never knew where you were, what time am I in and everything. And they had King Tut in just one little part of one little room. Well, a big chunk of this new museum is King Tut, and they've been able to take everything out of storage and put it out there for King Tut.
Why
But-
were we not allowed to take pictures of King Tut? And I forget why.
I don't know. No idea.
Those are in separate rooms. and
They
we were
probably
allowed-
wanted you to buy it from them or something, I don't know. We've been in some other places, Deb and I have been in some other places where you can't take pictures, like in the Amber Room in Catherine's Palace in Russia, where you couldn't take pictures in there because they wanted to sell you the pictures. You can't take pictures in the Sistine Chapel in Rome. Similar thing. You can buy pictures, but you can't take them.
Some places you can't because they don't want flash on, like for paintings or
Yeah.
old,
No,
really,
it's-
really
it's-
old stuff they don't want.
It's not that, it has to do with the people who came in and restored the Sistine Chapel. They have all the rights on photos and stuff and that's so they don't allow the public to take photos.
Yeah, the Sistine Chapel, the people who came in and completely cleaned the Sistine Chapel did it for free, but their deal was nobody can ever take a picture. We have to be able to sell all the pictures from here on in. That was the deal that they gave. Apparently that was acceptable to the Vatican to do that.
But the iPhone changed all of that.
Well, yeah, today we don't need flashes to take pictures. The pixels, we have so many pixels on our phone that we can take a picture in the dark and get a decent picture today. But there was a time when, remember flash bulbs? Most of us in this age remember when it was like, whoa, flash bulb just went off in the room. So it's probably different today than it was. Any other questions on that?
And following up on your gnats and lice and flies and whatever, nowhere does it, maybe I'm missing it, that God did not make them disappear. They just moved from gnats and lice to the flies, but nowhere in there it says, like the blood, he cleaned it like the frogs.
Well, it does
They
say that
disappeared.
God made the frogs disappear, or the frogs die. It does say that God made the frogs die.
Yes, but on gnats and lice, it doesn't
It
say
doesn't
they
say
were
that.
removed.
It doesn't say that, no.
So they're still there.
Possibly, we don't know.
I can testify, I have gnats in my kitchen.
Okay. So they have moved from the Nile to New Haven, Indiana.
No fun.
We'll have to stay away from that neighborhood, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the flies. Any other questions on the gnats or lice? Okay, let's move on to the flies. This is verses 20 through 32. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh as he goes to the river, and say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials, on your people, and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of flies. Even the ground will be covered with them. But on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen. Goshen would be the Jews, right? That's Israel. So I will deal differently with the land of Goshen. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. Chosen people, right? This sign will occur tomorrow. And the Lord did this. Dense swarms of flies poured into Pharaoh's palace and into his houses and into the houses of his officials throughout Egypt. The land was ruined by the flies. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God here in the land." In other words, you guys can go have sacrifice to your God, but you're not allowed to leave. But Moses said that would not be right. The sacrifices we offer to God would be detestable to the Egyptians. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? We must take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God as he commands us. In other words, we have to leave. 3 days away is the boundary of the country. Pharaoh said, "I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but you must not go very far." So we're arguing about the 3 days here, right? "Now pray for me." Moses answered, "As soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord, and tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Only let Pharaoh be sure that he does not act deceitfully again by not letting the people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord." Or keep your word, right? Then Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord did what Moses asked. The flies left Pharaoh and his official and his people, not a fly remained. But this time also Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go. Okay, so let's go through this one. God tells Moses, "Get up tomorrow morning, go down to the river," and when Pharaoh is going down to the river to do whatever he does, probably his bath or something, confront him at that point. Tell him, "Let my people go so that they may worship me. And if you don't let them go, I'm going to send swarms of flies on you and on your officials, and on your people and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of flies, even the ground will be covered with them. But on that day I will deal differently with the people of the land of Goshen." So the Jews from here on in, it's going to be different for the Jews. From here on in, the Jews will not experience the same plagues. It's going to be different now. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I am the Lord, that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. So now we know the difference between believers and non-believers, right? We still see that difference today. The believers deal with the flies of the world, the non-believers, or the flies, Satan's flies of the world, the non-believers, not so much. So then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God here in the land." In other words, go sacrifice to your God here in the land. So you can sacrifice, you can go sacrifice to your God, but you can't leave. Moses says that would not be right. Now, that's the correct answer. That wouldn't be right. We're not going to do that. Unfortunately, Moses is about to give the wrong reason why that wouldn't be right. The sacrifices we offer our God would be detestable to the Egyptians. That's not the problem. The problem is not that worshiping our God is detestable to the Egyptians. The problem is God has told you to let our people go. It has nothing to do with our sacrifices being detestable to the Egyptians, but that's the excuse Moses gives Pharaoh, and it's about to get him tripped up here. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? In other words, if we do our sacrifices here in Egypt and don't leave the country, your people are going to stone us. Okay? Because we're violating their religious laws. We must take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God as he commands us. Now that is the correct answer. God commands us to go make a trip into the wilderness. But he shouldn't have said the first part about, we can't do this because it's gonna, your guys are gonna hurt us if we do it. Pharaoh said, I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness. He doesn't say 3 days. He doesn't say the border. He says in the wilderness. But you must not go very far. Now pray for me. So he's trying to negotiate here the thing that says, all right, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go to a place where my people won't see you so that they won't stone you for making sacrifices that they don't approve of. But you still need to keep it inside the borders. You can't leave. It's not what God is asking for. Not at all what God is asking for. God is saying you must let them leave and go offer sacrifices after they leave, after they cross the border. So Moses got himself into a mess here by using the wrong reason. The right reason would have been to say, no, God is not going to let us offer sacrifices anywhere other than outside your border. That's what this is all about. It's all about us leaving Egypt. And he says, I will let you go to offer your sacrifices to the Lord in the wilderness, but you must not go very far. So he's trying, again, he's really trying to just negotiate this thing. He's saying, I'll let you go. You can do it in the wilderness. You won't have my people around, but just don't go over the border, right? Don't go over the border. Now, pray for me, okay? So get me out of this mess